Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I left off my last video with Merlin, showing a little preview of some things to come. This actually happened right after his first session of leading. Okay, so if his first session went so seemingly well, how did things change so quickly? Well, let me unpack that a bit. So first off, just because Merlin knows how to target various parts of his body does not necessarily mean that I can initiate touch to those areas, especially if it's in the beginning of a session. Now, during the session with positive reinforcement, Merlin eagerly participates, and his walls and barriers come down throughout the session. Once I was able to get the halter on him, I switched over to negative reinforcement to teach him pressure and release. I introduced Merlin with a light pressure to start. While Merlin did really well, it's really important to note that a heavier pressure or an unyielding pressure, such as being tied, would likely elicit a totally different response. Merlin is still very much so a wild horse. However, I fell into the trap of getting too comfortable with him too quickly. I was literally about to end the session when things went wrong. In the video clip, you can see me walking up to him way too boldly, which is putting a form of pressure on him and causing him to turn away. That was 100% my fault. But there was more to it. After he turned away, the rope touched his side and hindquarters. Now remember, I hadn't yet worked on touch over his whole body, whether that be with my hands, a stick, or the rope. The touch of the rope was new and scary to him, so he took off, only to have that rope chase him. Now prior to this happening, the rope really didn't bother him that much. I had let it hang a couple times, and he also dragged on the ground without much of a problem. But the touch of it on his back and hindquarters really frightened him and created that negative association with the rope. Another problem was that I had too short of a lead rope. I let go of the rope pretty quickly because I didn't think I had enough rope to be safe. I didn't like how close to his hindquarters I was, and I didn't want to risk him kicking out at me. Horses can be very dangerous when afraid. Their instincts are to survive, and personally, that's one of my own goals, so I let go of the rope. It's unfortunate because I literally have a longer lead line that I bought specifically for the purpose of teaching Mustangs to lead. But I grabbed this rope out of convenience, and because it seemed all was going well. Again, I was getting a little too comfortable with him. Yet another problem was time. While I wasn't in a rush to finish, I did have an evening commitment. Ideally, I would have had a longer lead line on and an unlimited amount of time. If that had been the case, I probably would have let him be for a period and then worked through it with him. But I wasn't sure if the chunk of time that I did have was long enough to fix this. At this point, he was not only fearful of touch, but now the dragging lead line. Some people will leave a drag line on a horse, and by doing so, the horse can sort of work it out on its own. The action of the horse stepping on the lead can teach it how to respond to pressure. However, I made the choice not to do this, especially since I couldn't supervise, and instead I accepted that this would likely be a major setback, and we would have to work through this. When I first got Merlin, it looked like he had been very irritated by the tag that he was wearing. He had actually removed it on several occasions at the corrals in California and then at the pickup site in Vermont. It appeared he had rubbed away the hair from his attempts to remove the tag. I didn't want him desperately trying to remove the halter as well, and somehow, some way get caught, so I really didn't want that halter staying on him. So I made the decision to use the chunk of time that I had to work towards getting the lead and the halter off, and I used positive reinforcement to do this. What a handy tool this was to have, and it would also be the method that I would use to get the halter back on when I went to work with him again. It took a little bit of time because he was now afraid of the rope that was dragging behind him, but I was able to get first the lead and then the halter off. I made it a priority to get out the next day to practice haltering. Alright, so this is the next day. Yesterday was the day that I haltered and started leading, and because he had that bad experience, it's miserable out today. If you can't tell, it is quite different than yesterday. I want to practice haltering. I'm not going to try leading today. I just want to make sure we can get the halter on, or not. Maybe just practice trying to get to that point. So the rain picked up and I wasn't able to record, but I was able to get the halter on after about 30 minutes. So we just got the halter on. We got it on yesterday during the rain, but my phone got too wet, so we had to stop. It is very, very muddy. Saying hi?
So I'm not gonna work on leading just because it is just so gross. Hopefully when it dries up, we'll try that again. But I did want to make sure the halter would be getting on him, and I got it on him yesterday and then today. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Unfortunately, the next few weeks contained rain, mud, cold, and bad footing, and I wasn't able to work with Merlin for a couple of weeks. During this time, Merlin seemed to regress even further. All right, today's the day that hopefully I'm able to work through some things with Merlin in regards to leading. So I just got the halter on him, as you can see. I think he already knows what's coming, so he's a little nervous. Okay, so I'm gonna go on the other side of the fence, and my plan is to attach the lead rope. I have a long, I think it's like a 20-foot or 20-some foot line, and I'm gonna put that on him, and I have all day to figure this out, all day. So we're not gonna stop. Hopefully we get it by the end of the day. I'm guessing when I snap that on, he's gonna pull it through the fence. I just wanna be on the other side because I don't wanna be in his way when he spooks. And, oops, water's on, hold on. Okay, I'm back. Horse people get it. We like to multitask, and the water was overflowing. So, yeah, once I get it on, he's probably going to spook, pull it through, go around the arena, but I have my long lead line, so I'll be able to grab it, and then we're gonna work through pressure and release. And hopefully in that process, he'll overcome some of his fears, hoping. But I think it's just something that we have to work through, so we're gonna do it. So as I mentioned earlier, I used positive reinforcement to halter him and then get the lead line on. And just so you guys know, this was about an hour to halter and clip that line on. I'm not even kidding, this took a very long time, and he's definitely regressed since the last session you saw. Merlin is a lot less forgiving than my first Mustangs, Libby and Britta, but that's exactly why I wanted to start with younger Mustangs before moving on to older Mustangs. I think it's just a general rule of thumb, but definitely something to consider if you're thinking about adopting your first wild Mustang. I know I gained a lot of confidence because I started with younger horses. So now that the rope was on, I was just going to let him hang out in the pen and get used to it. This was a chance for him to walk around with it, have it drag behind him, step on the rope, feel the pressure, feel the release, and to just get acclimated to it. Okay, so I'm really just letting him work this out on his own. I'm glad he's moving around and it's dragging. So that's already better than last time. I'm just gonna let him have some time to himself for a bit, and then I'll go in and work with him. So after Merlin was wearing the drag line for a while and had settled down, I went in to go to work. Once I had the rope, I just had to get to the center of the circle. Now the rope was looped over his neck, so I stepped in front of him to change directions and swung it over to fix it. Okay, so it's only in my process of editing that I realize I don't think I covered this in my last video. Before I ever clipped a lead rope on Merlin, I taught him how to round pen. So basically I was using my body to communicate with him and do things such as direction changes. I have found that it works really well in conjunction with the lead line. Before I put pressure on the line, I'll use my body to communicate what I'm asking, and then I'll follow up with the rope. In a way, it sort of gives the horse a hint as to what the pressure means because I'm using it alongside something that they already know. So my first goal when working with Merlin was to work through that rope situation to the point where he wouldn't be panicking with it being attached to him. This was really just the tip of the iceberg for the work we had to do. I don't remember exactly what I was about to do here, but this is a great example for you to see what exactly I mean when I say that he's regressed in other areas. He's lost a lot of confidence around leading, and now I have to work through this as well. Thankfully, the time it took for him to calm down after taking off was much faster than it had been previously. He ran for a couple strides before stopping, and then I got back to work. Not too long afterwards, I felt he was ready to move on. I had a hunch that reintroducing touch would be the harder part. That initial touch of the lead line on his side and hindquarters really affected him. It was as if I was working with a completely different Mustang who had not yet been touched. I've been using my stick as a sort of extension of my arm so I don't have to get quite as close to touch him. You can see that I ask him to yield his hindquarters to face up to me and then give him a big release once he stops and faces me square on. So I started by just rubbing the air above his forehead and then taking my stick away. After we did that for a few minutes, we took a little break. When we picked up this second session, he was already a lot better than when we started. He wasn't nearly as panicked about the ropes, and he was listening really well. So a great start to the second session. I felt really good about the point where we were able to get to with the ropes. And now the next big hurdle will be working on touch all over his body. Like I already mentioned, when the rope touched him that first time, he really did have a pretty serious setback. Touch all over his body, and really anywhere, has been really difficult. And then when there's nearly 2 weeks off because of the weather, it's only gotten worse. So I'm setting out to work on that. I have quite a bit more footage left of this session and sessions to come, so I'm actually going to save this for another video. So stay tuned for next week and you'll get to see that. As always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Have a great rest of your day.